I recently bought another house, this time as a primary residence, where I actually had to move to that house, and it reminded me that there's a lot of other expenses that come with homeownership. And these other expenses, if overlooked, can actually be super costly for those that haven't budgeted for them. So today, let's talk about them. Let's talk about those additional costs that are often overlooked. So I thought the best way to actually break this down was to break this into 3 distinct categories: before you buy the house, when you're going through the process of buying the house, and after you've already purchased it. I think this breakdown makes the most sense because it'll let you know at what point in the process you actually need to take out your credit card and start spending. All right, so let's talk about before you actually buy and also before you actually make the move. And I want to start off with addressing financial preparation, preparing yourself to buy a home. Now, I understand that sounds a little bit weird, but hear me out. As an example, if you are credit challenged, meaning your credit score is below a 580, in most instances, you're gonna need to do some credit repair. And oftentimes, a lot of home buyers resort to credit repair companies. And those companies don't operate on thank yous and well wishes. They operate in cold hard cash. So you can find yourself spending hundreds of dollars trying to get your credit score up as high as possible, or at least high enough to be approved for a loan. So that's a real cost of home ownership. It's something that you're doing specifically so you can get into a home. Now, there's a lot of other rabbit holes that we can get into when we start talking about financial prep, but the only other one that I'm going to bring up is getting prepared for your down payment. In other words, saving. This is a real cost for you, more of an opportunity cost, if you will. Instead of you buying that latte, instead of you splurging on that car, instead of you shelling out money for whatever other habits you might have, you're purposely saving so you can purchase. So in many respects, this type of cost is really more sacrificing the immediate pleasure for a long-term gain. But again, that's something that we can quickly go into a rabbit hole. So let's keep going. That one might not be as easy to digest. Now, another big expense that's often overlooked, and one that isn't really that abstract as the previous one that we just covered, is leaving your current home. Regardless if you're currently renting the apartment or own the home that you're in, there is a real cost of you leaving. Because if you're in an apartment or leasing a home, chances are you're going to do some repairs on that property before you leave it, or else you're going to sacrifice your deposit. Worst case scenario is you get invoiced for the condition of the home that you left it. So you're probably going to be doing some significant cleanup and repair work. Now, if you own the home, it's even more important because chances are you want to maximize the value of that home. And that comes in the form of painting the home, doing some deep cleaning, possibly doing some upgrades, and for sure doing some repairs. So this expense alone of you restoring that property to its previous condition can amount to thousands of dollars. Now, the next cost is moving materials. And I'm not even talking about hiring the movers. That's going to come in after you purchase the property. I'm actually speaking about the materials that you're going to purchase before you actually buy. Because you're going to need boxes, you're going to need tape, you're going to need all types of moving material to protect the stuff that you're trying to move. Now, don't let the price of one box fool you. Sure, that might be a couple of bucks. However, you're not just buying one, you're buying a ton more, especially the more that you want to protect the items that you're moving. Then you're talking about buying Tupperware. Then you're talking about buying crates. Then you're talking about buying blankets, those moving blankets that help protect the mirrors, the fragile items, a ton of other expenses that come with the move. Now, before we get into the home purchasing expenses, let's talk about a sneaky expense that everybody overlooks, and that's cancellation fees. There are certain contracts that you're currently in because of the property that you're in, and you might find yourself paying some cancellation fees that you didn't account for. This could be internet providers, this could be utility providers, this could be a ton of other expenses that you didn't forecast for, because not all the services that you currently have are transferable to the new place, because that new place might not actually carry the same services. And don't just think about what's within your home, also think about what you actually do outside of that home. As an example, I currently work out at F45, and I have an F45 monthly membership at a specific location. So not only am I on the hook for that membership for the rest of the month, I'm also looking at a new membership for the exact same thing, just wherever my house happens to be now. So there's a point in time where you can find yourself paying double the fees. And a lot of people overlook this until it's actually too late, until they're actually purchasing the home, and then they find this out. So don't let that happen to you. At least be aware before you go into it. But now let's get to the major expenses, the ones that are often cited when you're purchasing a home. When you're purchasing a home, most of us are going to need to pay a down payment. Now, I say most of us because there's some financial products out there, such as a VA or a USDA loan, that require 0% down. But for the most part, you're going to be asked for a down payment, and the minimum down payment in most of the products is going to be about 3 to 5% down. That's minimum. And what's important to understand about down payments is that you need to have access to this cash at the time of closing. In other words, you do need to have this money readily available if you're going to purchase. Now, the second expense when you're buying a house is one that is so often overlooked and misunderstood, and that is closing costs. Simply because you're being asked by the lender for 5% down doesn't mean that as soon as you have that 5% down, you're ready to purchase the home. Far from it, there's additional expenses that you need to be ready for, because when you get to that closing table, not only are you going to be asked for that down payment, but there's going to be additional fees, expenses, and costs associated to you closing. And to give you a realistic number when it comes to closing costs, you're looking at paying about 3 to 5% in closing costs. That means if the house is $200,000, you're looking at $6,000 to $10,000 just in closing costs, which is comprised of title fees, lender fees, prepaid property taxes, prepaid homeowners insurance. All of that gets lumped in and you're paying at closing. So again, you need to have that money ready to go at the closing table, or else you're not closing. Another expense that comes up when you're purchasing is the home inspection. When you buy a home, please inspect it. Get a professional home inspector to go to that property and spend 3 to 4 hours looking it over. Even though a home inspection can cost you $400 to $700, depending on the size of the home, it will actually make you money, because that home inspector will be able to identify certain things that you overlooked whenever you were looking at that property, that you can now use that intel to renegotiate with that home seller. I'll give you an example. With this particular home that I ended up purchasing, I spent about $500 for that home inspection. And it was thanks to that inspection that I was able to get a $1,000 closing credit, in addition to about $600 worth of repair work that the homeowner ended up doing. So please get the appropriate inspections, even though it is going to cost you some money on the front end. And oftentimes you're going to find yourself requesting other service professionals to come out to the property, like electricians, plumbers, roofers, foundation people, and on and on. And many of those providers actually charge a trip fee. So just note that this is a real cost. However, it doesn't need to be all money wasted. This is going to help you save money in the long run. Now, another expense that often comes up, especially with properties that haven't sold in a while, is paying for a survey. Oftentimes you as a home buyer are going to pay for a survey, which is essentially a drawing that defines a property's boundaries. In other words, it lets you know what you're purchasing, and if you have a lender involved, they're going to require that you have one. And for this particular property here, again, the homeowner didn't have a survey, so I ended up offering to pay for it in the initial negotiation, which a property of this size ended up costing about $500. But now that we're talking about lenders, let's continue. Let's talk about something else that they're going to require that you pay for, and that's an appraisal, which can run about $500 to $700 depending on the size of the home here again. And that appraisal is very important because it helps determine the value of the property and lets the lender know how much they're going to be able to lend on that property that you're looking to purchase. So here again, you're swiping the credit card up front. Now here again, in this category, we're talking about the expenses that come with you actually purchasing the property. And another expense that is optional and often comes up is that of a home warranty. A good home warranty should also be seen as an investment, which essentially a home warranty is a service contract that covers the repair or replacement of major home systems and appliances. I'll give you another example, one that just happened last month. One of our clients bought a property in Carrollton and everything went perfectly. The inspection came back extremely well. There was really nothing major that we needed to ask for. But one can't predict the future. So we ended up getting a home warranty, which cost about $625 if I remember correctly. And about 2 weeks after closing, a disaster happened where the HVAC went out. So as you can imagine, that's a major expense that now my client, which is now the homeowner 2 weeks into the home ownership of that home, ended up needed to pay. Now, while the home warranty didn't cover the entire expense, it did chip in $2,500 worth. So by them having that home warranty, they saved at least $1,900 on that one item. And they have about 11 more months of coverage for the rest of the appliances and major items that might go bad during that time. So it buys you a little bit of peace of mind, but it also is an expense that you need to account for. Now, for the most part, these are the expenses that you're going to experience as you're purchasing a home. So let's talk about after you've purchased that home and the cost associated to moving. because now you actually have to move. Now you need to account for the moving costs. Now there's 3 main ways that you can move, and they all have their pros and cons. The first way is by putting as many items on the bed of your truck as possible and going back and forth as many times as needed. There you're essentially investing sweat equity and gas money. Now, second way of moving is you going out and procuring that U-Haul and getting some people, either paying them by the hour or by the day, to come and help move all of your stuff. So here your expenses are going to be the U-Haul, the gas money, and however much you're paying the people helping you. And the last way of moving is hiring that professional moving company that will do a lot of things for you and happens to be insured. So if they break your stuff, they're on the hook for it. So for me, out of all the times that I've moved, I end up going with that middle option most of the time. I've done all 3, but the middle one just seems to be the best fit for my particular needs. I'll usually procure the U-Haul and then hire people to come and help me move everything. Now for this particular move, however, I ended up going with the full service option because my knee was acting up, and for the longest time I was limping. So I really couldn't do a lot of heavy lifting. So I ended up allowing the moving company to do basically everything for me. And for that expense, it was about $900. Now, another expense that we often don't account for is the utility and home setup costs. Most of the things that you set up on your home are gonna have an installation fee attached to them. Regardless if you're trying to get your water and waste connections done through the city, or you're trying to get electricity, or you're trying to get your cable providers out there, there will be an installation cost. Now, of course, in most cases, you can't avoid that. All I'm saying is be mindful of them and budget them into your moving costs. And the third expense that comes up after the move is doing some repairs and upgrades to the home that you just bought. Because the best time to make repairs and upgrades is before you actually move in. So you might find yourself during the transaction getting bids from flooring companies, from painters, from whomever it is that you're trying to work with to help do some repairs or remodeling after you buy that house. And depending on what you're trying to do, that is going to have a real cost. Here again, I'll give you some examples with this particular home. I'm going to do some painting because the studio is being set up right now, and I'm also going to remodel one of the bathrooms, which means that I need to have about $5,000 within these next 30 days in order to accomplish that. Now, I know that we just went through a ton of different expenses that you may or may not have considered. So I want to invite you to check out our Home Buyers Hub link down below, where you're going to find an in-depth checklist of all the things that we just mentioned, so you can budget appropriately when you're buying that next home. Now, as a huge favor, if you found this video valuable, go ahead and comment checklist down below. It's gonna let me know that you're here and that it helped you in some way. Now, if you thought this video was good, check out this one right here.